So, hello and welcome to the New Gig podcast. I'm your host, Glenn Hodgson, and today I'm delighted to be joined by founder of Startup Consortium and the weekly workforce editor, Eryn Peters. How are you doing, Eryn?
I'm doing well. Thank you so much for having me.
It's great to have you on. And please, just let's give the viewers and listeners a little bit of background on you. What have you been doing? How did you get to this place? And what's keeping you busy?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I've been working remotely for 15 years. So I think when it comes to the future of workspace, I was doing it before it was cool. And I think I had had one office job and just absolutely hated it. And that's when I went full on into digital nomadism and getting back into tech. And when I started doing that, I scaled two freelance platforms beyond their unicorn status threshold. And now I run a consultancy and write a newsletter about the future of work. And I've been doing a lot of research about AI lately as well. So anything to do with the future of work, nomadism, remote work, fractional workforces and freelancing, you name it, like I've got an opinion on it.
Exactly. Well, that's what we need, and of course, we're all avid readers of the weekly workforce in terms
Oh,
of
thank you.
bringing together all the knowledge, happenings, expertise on a weekly basis.
Yeah, thank you so much. And I think now when everyone can be a creator and with AI, there's so much content out there, and it's really hard to find what's relevant and what is important for all these leaders that are shaping the future of work. So I kind of took on that role myself.
Well, thanks for doing that. And with your helicopter view of the sector and what's happening at the moment in terms of the now of work as well as the future of work regarding work styles and how things are operating, what are kind of the main trends and the main themes that you're seeing on a global basis?
Yeah, I think there's three kind of main buckets. Obviously, the impact of AI and automation is huge. The rise of skills and project-based hiring and remote work and global talent pools. And so I think they're all somewhat interconnected in different ways. And it's a bit of a dominoes house of cards in a way, too. You change one thing and then everything else naturally changes.
Yeah.
Because obviously, with AI and the impact of automation, I mean, the whole recruitment and hiring process has entirely changed. You have more people creating resumes with AI and more people kind of parsing resumes with AI on the hiring side. So it's like bots versus bots. And, what's the ethical concern with hiring when you have AI involved and when it comes to bias, So that's
Yeah.
one big hot topic right now, let alone the impact on productivity gains. So if I can produce higher quality outputs at a faster rate, what does this mean for my work as an employee or a freelancer? And how does that affect pricing? I think that's another hot topic and change that we're going to see. Traditionally, right now, we pay people on time, not on output. So you're going to be punished right now for getting work done more quickly, right? Because less hours equals less money for a lot of freelancers in many ways. So that's another kind of related topic to AI. But all of this is kind of changing the way that we're hiring people. We're not hiring based on time and roles. We're hiring based on skills and ability and outputs. So that shift to more of an outcome-based work, I think, is another real trend that we're seeing exactly because of that, hours don't necessarily equal
Mm,
outputs
mm.
discussion. And then lastly, we can't ignore remote work and globalization of workforces. I think that's going to be an ongoing trend for many years as we see this tug and push and pull of people going back to the office or working remotely. So
Yeah.
that's kind of the top three broken out a little bit more.
And how do you see that in terms of the developments here? Because you're absolutely right. For so long, we've seen recruiters going for a title, and now it is this sort of subtle, but it's gaining weight and gaining speed in terms of the value that you can bring to a company or organization. This is the thing that's really important, and very specific deliverables why you bring someone on board. This seems to be sort of a shift, which is was kind of niche at first, but now it seems to be getting more and more standard.
Yeah, and I think it's more standard in the sense that people are willing to accept it and that people
Mm,
are trying to adopt it. But it really is it's so revolutionary compared to how we've hired traditionally in the past, because it's not just about hiring and getting someone in the door of saying, I need a CMO. It's how are we going to treat our upskilling or track skills within my company so that I'm even rehiring people internally almost to a certain extent? So
Mm,
is someone going to be a great designer on the marketing team and then move and be a great designer on the product team and then have this free flowing movement within a company? That suddenly changes organizational structure, budgets, like all of this gets really hairy and complex. So I think we're seeing a lot of people have this light bulb moment that we need to shift to skills-based hiring, but the actual implementation in large businesses and how we track this with technology, growing skill sets, like when was the last time you updated your resume, even as a freelancer, let alone if you have a job, right? So how are we tracking abilities and skills is a problem I don't know if anyone's truly solved yet on how we keep that information evergreen. So it's it's a big new world out there when it comes to skills-based hiring, but more people are trying to solve this problem, which is really great to see.
mm. Absolutely, and I think it is the fact that we tend to have sort of HR departments and the legal teams who seem to be a little bit reticent about this. They're not sure about how this is going to fit into the traditional way of doing things. Then, of course, there's compliance issues as well as constant worry that if we do things differently, are we still compliant in terms of paying our taxes, employer contributions, how this is actually set up in the gray area that exists in so many countries and so many geographies, sadly, still today.
Yeah. Well, I think if anything, outcome-based work, actually lawyers are probably going to like it a little bit more when it comes to compliance, because if we
Mm,
look at some legislation in places like the UK with IR35, having a specific outcome-based project versus an ongoing contract is one of the things that might determine if you're inside IR35 or outside IR35. So shifting a little bit more to project-based or outcome-based work is one of the ways that you can reduce some of the gray area when it comes to employment classification, at least.
mm, mm. And I think this is an important point to raise the fact that sort of very clearly defined beginning, middle, and end to a project puts you more keenly within this kind of bucket of activity and maybe takes away some of the fuzziness about some of the roles and where you can be classified in terms of the full-time employee, contractor, freelancer, so many different sort of titles that are put in there. But at the end of the day, the big thing is that the value that you can bring and the work that you can deliver via projects, that should make things easier, hopefully.
You would think, yes. And I think it's also better for business and tracking whether or not, a project is going to plan or is delivering value is also really good for the bottom line more often than not. And, in my experience, companies tend to change a little bit more quickly when they see the actual cash value in something.
Yeah.
And so I think that's also a strong motivator of people shifting to this style of work and employment a little bit more quickly than maybe they would have before.
Mm, mm. And also the speeding up of if the traditional recruitment process can be a very long, drawn out element, but here it's basically having the talent on demand, being able to sort of know what are the skills, knowledge, and expertise they can actually sort of bring, and get them on board and have them working and delivering very quickly. So it speeds up the process and takes out some of the inefficiencies of a traditional recruitment process.
Absolutely. And I think that this really kind of comes down to the sense of maintaining relationships with workers. And so if you shift to this more contract-based, freelancer-based, project-based type of work, it's not about getting a volume of net new people who can do this work. You're going, oh, I worked with Glenn before on this project, and I'm going to reach out to Glenn first the next time there's
Mm,
something that might be a fit. And so it kind of shifts to employer branding and talent relationship management at a certain point where you're going, okay, it's very expensive and time consuming to find new people to constantly do work with us. And so why not maintain relationships where people kind of already know me, like me, and trust me enough that they're probably willing to make time in their busy schedules as a successful freelancer to come and work for me again. And
mm.
so I think that kind of dynamic of traditional recruitment, let's get as many people in the top of funnel as possible so that maybe we hire one person, It's changing to going, how can we create this curated talent pool of people that we're going to keep in touch with or offer mutual value back and forth with? And I think that's really cool to see and how it's shaping the dynamic between employers and workers these days.
Mm. And I think it was well overdue. And when we've a lot of these recruitment firms, the bigger ones, medium-sized ones, have been really in the sort of the first bucket that you were talking about there. It's volume, shake some things through and see if you can get someone out there. But thankfully, their breakfast and even their lunch is being eaten by the smaller, more nimble players who are using large language models, the AI, to be able to offer a better service to individuals as well as companies.
Yeah, definitely. And I think it again comes down to how are we going to track all of this?
Yeah.
Of is it the traditional applicant tracking system is roles based and titles based, and the average resume kind of age is a few years old at best. So who are you really contacting? Is it Eryn who has the skills today, or is it Eryn that has her skills when she applied 4 years ago? So that relationship is really keeping on top of what is someone able to deliver for me and how are they growing and changing in their careers.
Mm, absolutely. And I guess this brings us to the other side of the equation, which is individuals needing to keep their CVs up to date, as you say there. But also, what more can you say about sort of personal branding and the importance of actually sort of having your sort of portfolio of expertise that you can bring to the marketplace, but also sort of this kind of constant always in beta role of marketing, promoting, and putting yourself in the shop window.
Absolutely. And I'm glad you mentioned both resumes and portfolios because I think they're very different. And as do I think is your personal brand. Again, CVs are really made to be tailored to a specific role when you're applying for it. They're not necessarily always going to best reflect what you're able to do, especially when we talk about projects, because I could write that I was a CMO at a specific company, but it doesn't actually explain what was my impact and what did I accomplish in that way. And I do think that portfolios are usually a little bit more prepared to present this in a way. This is what we had built, this is what we had accomplished, and this is my role within that. And so I do think that having a strong portfolio is really important. It's also very hard to keep up to date because you're going, gosh, what did I do again? How do I present this? How do I explain the impact? And so one thing I always like to recommend to freelancers is before you even start boasting about things online or creating more of a voice for yourself, make sure you have a brag book. And every couple of months, sit down in a Google Doc or wherever you want to store this and write about your accomplishments. Because by the time you need to actually update your portfolio or by the time you're going to apply for a job, it's really hard to remember everything that you did and having those little wins writing down. So one, it's a really feel good exercise. You get to like be really proud of yourself and flex a little bit, humble brags. But it's also just a great evidence manual for when you're preparing these things. So I think the first thing is to get in a good habit of writing out all of your accomplishments, big or small, writing data points, adding in screenshots of stuff that you're proud of so that when you're ready to create that portfolio, wherever it lives, or if it's a resume or wherever you're going to put it, you have this information you can pull and be ready. And then once you have those pieces together, it's very easy to build an online brand. You can see the
Mhm.
similarities of what I'm really good at or what I should be maybe developing or how I want to change from what I've done to what I want to be. And I think you just need to put yourself out there online. Like everybody has a platform now. How easy is it for us to get onto LinkedIn and start conversations or contribute to articles?
Yeah.
I don't think that everybody needs to suddenly be really great at being a social media and marketing expert, but you do have to put yourself in front of people that you want to work with, whether it's private communities on Slack or going to networking events. Anything that's going to get you talking about yourself and your skills is going to be a lot easier than constantly having to update a resume and hoping that someone reads it. So build relationships, get in the right rooms, whether they're virtual, in person, on LinkedIn or otherwise, and just start putting out the work and knowing what you're good at and knowing what you've accomplished.
Yeah. Great advice there, Aaron. It really is, because I think that this idea of not just doing it at certain points when you have to do it, but it's kind of an ongoing process. I think is crucial. And I think it's a fantastic learning as well. This element of almost sort of giving yourself the dopamine hit in terms of what have you done successfully on a
Yes,
sort of a weekly basis almost, so you can write down those successes and maintain these data points for when you need them. Because I think it's absolutely true that these are so easy to you're in the moment. You've just done something interesting, important that you think has added value, and then a week later, of course, you're on to the next thing. You're in the middle of that, and
yeah,
things fall off the table very, very quickly. So I think that makes a lot of sense to be able to have this sort of discipline and keep it going on a rolling basis.
absolutely. And I mean, the dopamine hit is so important, I think, especially for freelancers and independents, because you don't always get that feedback in the same way that you do if you
True.
have a manager or a regular touch point of someone giving you the high five or shouting you out from the rooftops in a way. And so, like, be your own best cheerleader. Make sure that you are writing these things down and being really proud of them. And we all have good days and bad days at work, regardless of where and how you work.
Yeah.
And on those bad days, being able to open that up and really go, yeah, I am a badass, like it's really cool to be able to go and do these things.
Precisely. And why do you think, sort of more broadly, the whole idea of one person companies, freelancing, is growing? Because it does seem to be something that's certainly since the COVID-19 pandemic, it's something that's
Mhm.
come from being very left field to something that's kind of more mainstream. And what can you say about this development? Is it technology led, or is it the people of all ages and backgrounds wanting maybe a little bit more freedom and flexibility in their work and lifestyles?
Honestly, I think it's more the people than the technology because I myself am a great example of working remotely for 15 years, but the market hasn't always been like this. And in fact, I wasn't even a freelancer and portfolio careerist back then either. But I think A Team had a really great research report that they did about the great betrayal, which was how's everybody feeling after all of these layoffs and all of the changes that have happened through the pandemic and after. And they said that 73% of knowledge workers said that the waves of layoffs over the last 2 years has actually made freelancing a lot more attractive than it was before. So you're
Mm.
seeing a lot of people wanting to diversify risk in a way where they're going, hey, having one employer for 5 or 10 years is a lot harder to get work after than if I spread out all of my kind of opportunities in a way, or I keep building. So if one thing falls, the rest are still there. And there's a
Completely.
lot of people who still wanted that flexibility too. The same research study, 86% they wanted increased flexibility in when and how that they worked.
Mm.
But 67% also said the emergence of generative AI was a part of it. So there is a little bit of that technology aspect that you mentioned. And the reason they were saying technology was more interesting were those productivity gains. So when you're an employee, if you're more productive, what's your reward? More work. If you're a freelancer, if you're more productive, what's your reward? More time, freedom, and flexibility to do what I want. And so I think we have to kind of see the psychological impact of technology when we're looking at people shaping their careers, because it definitely is playing a role there too.
Mm. I think it's a great point that we often forget that yeah, the reward of more work as opposed to more freedom and flexibility is something is
Yeah.
part and parcel of this. And I think it's crucial as well what you're saying there, Erin, about the fact that we're kind of turning the established wisdom on its head. Whereas, oh, if you want flexibility and secure, and also you want security, then you have to have a full-time 9 to 5 job because this is the safest way of doing things. You get the paycheck coming in. But with the developments today, this is actually sort of the opposite. Actually, having a portfolio career whereby you have sort of several partners and projects on the go, this is a better hedge against uncertainty than one paycheck from one employer. They decide that you're surplus to requirements, and then you're left with nothing, and you have to sort of go and look again from zero. It's a much more sort of tricky and unsafe situation to be in.
Yeah, absolutely. And we have to look at the fact that these social contracts were broken. We had companies, especially in the startup world, it was really common for someone to say, oh, our culture is a family and we're here for each other. And all of these people who were, quote, family suddenly were unemployed and had no support system, had very little severance or anything that came out of this. And they're going, hold on a minute. So it was family in the sense that I had to give a lot, but then I had no protection
Yeah.
at all. And when these social contracts are broken, it's really hard to rebuild trust in these environments between employers and workers. And I
Yeah.
think that's why we've seen a lot of this push and pull in how people are going about the hiring process, whether it's contracts or otherwise. They're going, can I bet on this person to stick around even if I pay them as a long-term in-house employee? But you also have these freelancers and portfolio careers that are going, I don't know if I fully trust you to take care of me anyways. So
Right.
why not kind of reduce the risk of this relationship on both sides and shift to more contract-based work or more freelancing as well? It's really interesting change in kind of this power dynamic.
It really is. No, 100% on that. And what's your sort of take on the current sort of discussions which rumbles on about the return to the office? Whereas we since sort of the end of the pandemic, we've slowly had this rolling back by industry leaders and individuals who should have more sense, but are still calling for the return to the office, as if, if you're not in a building 9 to 5, 5 days a week, you're not working. What's the general trends you see on this?
Gosh, I mean, I have a lot of opinions on this for sure.
Please share
um,
them.
Yeah, I think, coming off the topic of trust, this is a big factor of it too, right? Of people go, I don't know how to measure productivity and I don't know if you're working. And therefore, if you're in a chair, I'm going to assume that you're more likely to be working, right? If I can see you physically in an office, that's one way that I can track if you're doing something. So that's definitely one factor. I think the other is, you look at all of the trends in financial reports, there's a lot of people who have signed big office leases. We have to look at the financial impact of people going, what am I
Yeah.
going to do with this space for now? So that's another one. But also, I think, hybrid is really hard. It's really, really hard. I think if you're fully remote or you're fully on site, it's a lot easier to navigate. If you're fully on
Yeah.
site, you can develop ways of, hey, if I just walk up to so and so at their desk, I can have a chit chat, we can get stuff done. Whereas if you're working remotely, the way that you transfer information is totally different. You're doing a lot more documentation than tribal knowledge and all of this in different ways. But hybrid, a lot of people get stuck in the middle and they don't know how to operationalize that in a way that
Hmm.
makes sense. A lot of companies were doing remote okay, meaning, yeah, you can work from home a couple days a week. And they weren't doing remote first, which was if one person isn't in that boardroom when we're having a meeting, then everybody dials in from their own computer to level the playing field and saying that remote working is the better experience.
Right.
And so I think it was caught in between not knowing which side you kind of were going to float to the most. And so a lot of these companies that are doing return to office have been operating in a hybrid model for the last while. And they're going, it's not working very well because half the team is doing remote first, half the team is doing remote okay. And
Mm.
let's just call them all back until we're out of this lease. So it's a lot of different factors that are driving it. We're still seeing that more workers want to work remotely and have flexible working. And so we're going to continue to see lots of voluntary attrition and turnover because of this.
Mhm. Yeah, and it's also the best talent as well. I mean, certainly in a European context, we're seeing a shortage of the talent and individuals with the knowledge and skills that are needed, and therefore, in this kind of war for talent, the individuals will be able to call the shots in terms of the terms and conditions. And as you say, the flexibility angle is something that really resonates with everyone. So for companies and organizations to access the best talent and the individuals and skills that they need, they're going to have to find a way of being able to do this and bend towards the reality as opposed to this command and control models.
Oh, absolutely. And I think employers should be shaking in their boots just a little bit because Workday came out with a recent report and they were saying that 75% of industries are affected by high performers and top performers that are really
Mm.
likely to be leaving their position. And so it's not just anyone who's going to be turning over at these companies, it's the people that you really want to keep around that are a little bit fed up with it. So you have to start thinking, I want to hire the world's best talent.
Yeah.
Best talent typically have a lot of options. And why the heck am I their number one option? And so you really have to start answering that question in a way that's meaningful. If it means flexible work, great, provide that. If it means giving them meaningful work, great, provide that. But you really have to have these conversations internally and build those relationships to know what people want.
Mm, exactly. And I think it's also going beyond that as well, is organizations having this open talent strategy so that they can
Mm.
have full-time employees, open talent in terms of contractors and freelancers, but treat them in the right way and being able to give them the access to the information and allow them to do the job. And at the end of the day, deliver the value to the organization. There seems to be still a lot of these silos within organizations saying, well, we can allow the full-time employees to have this or these kind of benefits or access to these meetings, but the we're going to keep sort of one step removed the open talent because they might go and work for someone else. I mean, it's still a very
Yeah.
old-fashioned mentality, it seems, Erin, in terms of the way corporations approach the reality of work today.
Yeah, and I think it's tough because everyone I talk to on both sides of, oh, employees or contractors or remote worker on site, it's very polarizing. So we're going to go remote and we're never going to go back, or we're going to come to the office and we're never going to go back. And in reality, careers are nonlinear. There's a right time for someone to be an in-house employee and work 40 hours a week. And there's a time where someone wants more freedom and flexibility in their work.
Mm,
And once you go freelance, it doesn't mean you can never go back, even though some people are, shaming those who go back to being an employee as, having a failed freelance business. It's just not true, right? The world isn't built for freelancers yet. Like, it's hard to get a mortgage if you're a
it is.
freelancer. So some people want stability and ongoing payments if they're going to have kids or different things in their lives. The world isn't
Mm,
really set up for that. So I think we can't really look at one or the other across the board with the future of work. What we have to do is reduce these silos and put everybody into the same systems and tracking and going, okay, I really like Glenn and I really like what they can do. And basically, regardless of if they want to work part-time, freelance, full-time, in-house, I'm going to be able to have them in one system to find all their skills and know how to hire them where it makes sense. And
yeah.
so we need to reduce the silos first and foremost, but we don't have to basically build the future on one side of the equation or the other. And I think that's where we're seeing a lot of solution providers say, oh, we're a freelancer management system or we're an HRIS. Well, where's both? Where do these worlds come together? So
Mm.
that's what we have to look at is careers are nonlinear, they're holistic, and they're ever shaping, and so should organizations.
Excellent. Eryn, it's fantastic to speak to you about these things. There's so much more that we can discuss. And of course, through Weekly Workforce, we're getting the constant drip feed of intelligence and information. So thanks again for that. And look forward to hearing again from you soon as a guest as we unpick the realities of this ever moving feast.
Yes, thank you so much for having me. I think we'll chat again soon because it seems the future of work is changing every few months. So lots to discuss.
Completely. Thanks again.